You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome to the show. Happy Friday and a happy first day of shells. That's the half pads at Arizona football practice. The Wildcats worked out for a little over 2 hours over at Arizona Stadium this morning. I got a chance to have a firsthand look at the Wildcats. And now we'll talk about everything we saw from the practice field today. Before we get to everything with that and Arizona's now official entrance into the Big 12, I want to remind you to please subscribe to the Bleav in Arizona podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, including TuneIn and Google Play, or on Bleav.com. That's BLEAV.com. As well as my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson, where we'll be posting the video versions of everything we do here on the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Once again, I am your host, Matt Reynoldson. Now, I'm pleased to be at practice today to get a firsthand look at the Wildcats and see really what we're working with for this 2024 season. And there were a lot of good things that they put on the field today. We'll kind of roll through all of them, discuss what offensive coordinator Dino Babers had to say in his post-practice press conference, as well as some notable bites from offensive lineman Josh Baker and Jonah Savanaya. And they talked to us after practice in the Arizona Stadium media room. All right, so here we go. Let's get rolling on this. Arizona football practice starting with pads, and it was hot out there. If you want a little example for how hot it was, both Baker and Savanaya came into the post-practice press conference and left some significant sweat marks on the seats. Yeah, it was 90s approaching hundreds out there, triple digits. It's the Arizona fall practice weather, but certainly get you ready for some football on campus at the U of A. And we saw a lot of good things today. I think something that really sticks out about early on in fall camp, whether it's Arizona, I've obviously covered the Wildcats for a while now, whether it's at the pro level, I covered the Green Bay Packers for 3 years. The defense really always starts ahead of the offense, and I think we saw that in a lot of factions today in my first in-person look at this 2024 team in the fall camp version. We saw defensive players making plays, forcing turnovers, doing their best to impact the flow of the offense, if you will. And I think that starts with the defense kind of crashing in on the running game. What I saw from Duane Akina's defense today in the 11-on-11 drills, in even some of the 7-on-7s, is that they are crashing toward the ball. And Jose Umalu, the new defensive line coach, has a philosophy that his defensive linemen are going to attack the gaps, are going to wreak havoc in the middle of the defense to free things up for the linebackers, as opposed to maybe the space-eating mindset of former Arizona defensive lines, and even including last year when they had that massive transformation to a much better unit and a much better run defense that finished 2023 ranked in the top 30. So what we saw today was defensive linemen, making plays here and there. We saw Tai Uyunglele get in the backfield a couple times. Leviticus Sua had a couple nice plays from the defensive line spot, but he is listed as a linebacker. But a lot of the defensive linemen were penetrating on the edges, getting those offensive linemen to crash into the middle and really freeing things up for guys on the edge. We saw Jacob Manu make some plays, Justin Flo getting into the backfield quite a few times. I wrote a lot of these down. Jabari Mann factoring in as well. Tay Brown will be the starting, at least to start camp, will be the starting off-ball linebacker next to Jacob Manu on the inside. So I think we're seeing these guys in the front seven really get their feet wet and be able to get a disruptive mindset when it comes to the front seven, because they are ahead of the offense, especially as far as run game install right now. And it was an offensive focused day when it comes to the press conferences. So I'll get to the offensive talk in a little bit, but did want to focus on the defense because they did perform extremely well, and they are showing out and showing that they are not having much of a drop off even after defensive coordinator Johnny Nansen left for Texas. Duane Akina, with his 43 years of experience coaching, knows what he's doing with this group and knows that being multiple can create opportunities both for players to shine, but also cover up some weaknesses that Arizona might have in the front seven. And rotating a lot of guys in, especially at those defensive line spots, can keep the defensive linemen fresh. And if you have guys playing 35 snaps, if you have guys playing 40 snaps, instead of a full 80, sometimes 90 against those higher paced teams, you have fresher defensive linemen. And even if they're not maybe an A minus level player, even if they're a B minus, B level player, C plus level player, even if they can get in there and create some havoc and have one good snap or two good snaps in a row, that creates a little more balance in the defensive line rotation, keeps guys fresher. And when everybody's at that B to B minus level in the fourth quarter, that's when games are won. And if your guys are fresher, it may not be a talent conversation. It's a freshness conversation. And if Arizona's fresher on the defensive line, it can win some ball games in the fourth quarter that way with that rotation. Now, defensive back wise, I mean, from what I saw today and from what we knew was coming back with this Arizona defensive back room, this group is unbelievable. I mean, it's so refreshing to see the number of bodies and the competition on the back end, even with a group that returns 5, 6 starting caliber players. I mean, Tacario Davis is going to be a staple at that cornerback one spot, but we saw a lot of Traden Stukes today playing CB2. He was disruptive. He had an interception on Noah Fafita. He forced a fumble. He was all over things in the backfield, was all over his receivers. Yeah, he could be a true CB2, or he could slide into a spot that he played a lot last year in the nickel corner role or the dime corner role, whatever Dwayne Aquino wants to put him at. He is an extremely versatile defensive back, which I think defines a lot of the strengths for this Arizona defensive back room. So, okay, if you can't get it past the corners, if you can't throw short on them because they're coming down so hard to the ball, which both Tacario Davis and Traden Stukes do, if you're an offensive coordinator for an opposing team, what do you do then? Well, go over the top. You can't do that on Arizona either because you have a guy like Gunnar Maldonado back there who has become an extraordinarily effective free range safety. We saw that in the Alamo Bowl when he came across the field, read the eyes on a wheel route of Oklahoma freshman quarterback Jackson Arnold, and came over and intercepted the pass right on the sideline on what was a pretty darn good throw. It was just a better read by Gunnar Maldonado. He's a great rangy free safety. Dalton Johnson, another great rangy free safety that they have back there. And then you have a guy like Genesis Smith, who is just a freakish athlete. I mean, a guy that can play multiple positions, that can slide down potentially into a linebacker role, that can be a true safety, that can be a dime safety, that can be a nickel back in certain sets. Genesis Smith could be the chess piece that Dwayne Aquino could really capitalize on in this defense. And then you have guys like you have other guys on this defensive side of the ball that have just been so impressive all the way throughout. I mean, just look at this defensive back room and guys that stood out on that in this group and what we saw today. I mean, Javion Celestine was all over the one-on-one matchups today. He is maybe a little undersized, but is not getting beat on a 50-50 ball. That's what we saw today. And to have that as depth in a defensive back room is so impressive. Marquise Groves-Killebrew also had a great day on the back end. I mean, I saw these guys stand out time after time after time. And it just goes to show that in a league that wants to pass the ball, maybe except for Oklahoma State, who Arizona doesn't play this year, in a league that wants to pass the ball and has historically wanted to throw it over the top first, Arizona may have the best defensive back room in this conference and one of the best in the nation. How many defensive back rooms can say that they have 5 starters that feel pretty good about it? That are guys that are bringing back starting experience, and then 2 guys behind them that can just play step for step for step for them, cover all the receivers on the opposing side, be ball hawks, go for interceptions, get those pass deflections, lock down guys to where the quarterback is not seeing windows. I mean, this defensive back room has so many opportunities to succeed. And then If you're talking about the passing game overall for an opponent, what do you do then? You go to the tight end. Well, Jacob Manu can cover tight ends. Justin Flo, we've seen, can cover tight ends, has to get a little bit better at it. But there are athletes in the linebacking core that can cover tight ends, big athletes at the safety level that can do it. So I find it hard to believe that even like a Colorado with Shedeur Sanders, who is going to be a first round draft pick, I find it hard to believe that even Colorado and some of these other teams will find a way to pass the ball effectively against Arizona. There's a real bonus to having a defensive back room like that. And then we've also seen the defensive line start to flourish, and obviously having a veteran leader like Jacob Manu, an all Pac-12, first team all Pac-12 linebacker in the middle. That just goes to show that this defense, the sky is really the limit. Okay, I spent a little more time than I anticipated talking about the defense because it was impressive today, and it should be impressive during camp. We heard from Arizona offensive coordinator Dino Babers that the defense will always start camp ahead of the offense a little bit. It's really just play with your hair on fire, swarm to the ball, know the defense and know your assignments. But there's so much more coordination that goes into the offense. So the offense is a little bit behind the defense right now, especially in the running game. But there are so many ways and so many reasons to be confident in this offense if you're an Arizona football fan. And it starts, I think, with not just the stars in the offense, not just Noah Fafita and Tedero McMillan, who didn't practice on a team level today, but did some individual work and continues to be limited coming off of foot surgery. So not just the passing game, but the fact that Arizona describes its offense in one word: nasty. What does that mean? What does a nasty offense mean? Well, it means Dino Babers, and especially the offensive line, namely center Josh Baker, the returning starting center for the Wildcats, wanted to find this group as a team that mucks it up front and wants to establish the run and establish it in a way that sends a message to the other team. They go heavy personnel, probably more than they don't, honestly. We have seen a lot of 12 personnel. And to explain that, 12 personnel and personnel packages within the offense will often be named based on the first number being the number of running backs and the second number being the number of tight ends. So 12 personnel would be 1-2 personnel, which is one running back and two tight ends. We didn't see that a lot last year. But Dino Babers wants to bring these heavy sets into the Arizona offense. We also saw a lot of 21 personnel today, which means two running backs and one tight end. But that doesn't mean they're putting guys like Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt and Quali Conley in the backfield together a lot of times. It means they're going heavy sets, which means they're putting a heavy blocking tight end like Roberto Miranda being the lone tight end on the strong side of the formation. And they have the running back behind. Today it was Quali Conley being exceptional out there. And then they have a fullback, which we haven't seen a lot of, but look who's getting some fullback reps. It's Canyon Del Oro grad and Arizona true freshman Caden Luke, who was an absolute bulldozer last year in Arizona high school football, basically single-handedly won CDO, the state championship in 4A up there in Tempe. I mean, he was a monster running back. I was filming his highlights all year long. The dude can blast some people. And even when he's not carrying the ball, even if he is, if it's a fullback role, but if he's not carrying the ball, he can hit the gap that the running back is going into and make a linebacker feel it. I love the idea of a 21 personnel package, two running backs, one tight end, where it's Roberto Miranda chipping somebody on the outside and then Caden Luke blasting somebody in the hole and freeing things up for the running backs. However, this is a lot of wishful thinking early on because Arizona doesn't necessarily have the coordination in the running game yet and the push in the running game yet to be able to get a strong push on this Arizona defensive line and linebacking core. And I'm not sure you want them to at this point in camp either, especially because they're in shells, they're in half pads, they're not in full pads yet. But it's really interesting to hear the mindset of both Josh Baker and Dino Babers and Jonah Savanaya of what they want this offense to be and how much establishing the run for this team, for this program, can turn them into a smash mouth football team and a balanced offense altogether.
Us O-line, we got to have that mindset of running the ball. So this is perfect for us. The coaches that came in, they like to run the ball. We like to run the ball, so just run the ball.
How would you describe the offense that Coach Babers is wanting to run?
Nasty. Nasty.
Nasty?
Yeah.
Why nasty?
That's what he's been talking about every day that we've met with him. He wants us to. Yes, we have a lot of talent everywhere, but he wants to make sure that we know that yes, we can pass, but we've got to be able to run the ball and we've got to do it hard.
It makes my hair stand up that our starting center said the word nasty about an offense. You know, as they go, we go. You know, I grew up in the age where everybody used to call the offensive linemen hogs. I said, well, our offensive linemen are not hogs, they're elephants. And everybody says that the lions is the king of the jungle. That's not true. I've seen many lions look at a whole bunch of elephants and go, I ain't going down there. Those guys are big. So the elephants are the king of the jungle, and as they go, we go. And if Baker's going to lead and he says we're nasty, then we're nasty.
That mindset should make you very excited as an Arizona football fan, because you know this team is going to play smash mouth football. They're going to establish the run up front. They're going to want to run inside on teams. I mean, there are a lot of teams in this league. Kansas State and Utah in September might be the exceptions to this rule because they're very good in the trenches, especially Utah on the defensive line. But as you wear on during a season and attrition starts to take hold, Colorado doesn't have any depth on the defensive line. You know, some of these teams don't have the defensive line depth, the interior depth to come in and challenge Arizona, whether that is a Texas Tech, whether that's a BYU, whether that's a Houston, whether that's a West Virginia coming to Arizona, and ASU. They just don't have the bodies, the strength on the defensive line to withstand a smash mouth Arizona running game, especially since Arizona can counter that balance wise with one of the best quarterbacks in the conference and certainly the best wide receiver in the conference in Tetero McMillan. So that balance could be the difference between Arizona winning and losing games down the stretch. All right, let's go through some of my observations in practice today, and we'll stick, because it was an offense day, we'll stick with my observations on the offensive side of the ball. It starts with Noah Fifita. I mean, we've seen him. We've seen what he does on the field. We saw spring practice. Many of you saw the Arizona spring game under the lights, April 27th at Arizona Stadium. This is a guy that has just total command of what he's doing with this offense. And it's not just running the offense. It's not just being a game manager. It's that almost every ball is exactly where it's supposed to be. Almost every football comes out of his hand with zip. And the ones that aren't supposed to have zip. He'll float a feather to a Montana Lamonius Craig in the back of the end zone like he was doing in goal line drills today. Noah Fifita is, if you're worried about any sort of drop-off for number 11, he is ready for the moment. Justin Spears from the Arizona Daily Star said it on our fall camp preview podcast earlier this week, that he's built for this moment. And he is a guy that's not going to flinch in the face of pressure. And it just feels like every single rep, number 11 gets better. Noah Fifita is far and away the best quarterback in this program, far and away the unquestioned leader of the offense. And he's just someone that it's so easy to get excited about, because when your team is led by somebody of this talent caliber, of this mental caliber, the sky's the limit for a program like this. And Arizona could very well find itself in the college football playoff if everything goes on the back of Noah Fifita. We also have had to have a conversation in camp, because it was a factor in last season, about who's going to be the backup quarterback. And right now, early in camp, it's very early, day 3, but last year's backup to Noah Fifita, while JDL was hurt, was Braden Dorman. Well, Dorman has kept a really good hold on that number 2 spot as of now. He looks in great physical shape. There's zip coming off the ball, great arm back there, seems to be confident in the pocket. In one-on-one drills, he's hitting receivers in stride. Seemingly really good footwork, although admittedly I'm not a quarterback footwork expert. It doesn't seem awkward or stuttery or anything like that. Seems like he is throwing off strong platforms at all times. And I think that's what you're looking for a backup quarterback in Braden Dorman. Justin Spears told us earlier this week that Anthony Garcia, the transfer from San Jose State, was a matchup nightmare in the scout team for San Jose State. So he can move maybe a little bit better than a Dorman can, but seems to be a clear number 3 right now behind Dorman. The other guys, Cole Tannenbaum, some of these other guys are distant in that conversation. But I think the backup quarterback battle kind of comes down to those two right now from my eyes. And again, this is practice number 3 of fall camp, but from my eyes, it comes down to Braden Dorman and Anthony Garcia. On running back wise, Quali Conley had an amazing day back there. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt brings a ton of experience transferring in from New Mexico. He has the PFF numbers, had 17 touchdowns last year. He's going to be the guy that gets a lot of snaps. But Quali Conley was also an All-Mountain West caliber player last year at San Jose State, and he looks really good so far in camp. The highlight of the day was him reeling off a long touchdown run and even beating Takario Davis to the corner pylon of the end zone. The guy has burst. The guy gets through the hole well. And he could be a really strong asset to Arizona, whether it's taking starting running back snaps and taking it right up the A-gap, or splitting out wide a little bit, being a running back that catches some passes and doing some of the different wrinkles that Dino Babers wants to include in this offense. Couple of guys nicked up throughout the day. Justin Flo seemed to be dinged up a little bit late in practice. Looked like potentially a head injury, took off his helmet, walked off under his own power, looks to be fine. Don't want to speculate on head injuries, of course, nothing like that. Not saying it's concussion, not even saying he's in the protocol, but that was certainly something to watch there. And then Jono Smith, is a backup defensive back, also had a little bit of an injury early on in the day during a special teams drill, went down with a leg injury, but maybe nothing too concerning there overall. And for the most part, it seemed like Arizona held up very well in the heat. The Wildcats were hydrating very well. It took about a 4-minute break midway between practice to go inside, get in the air conditioning, get some water, and get back out there. So health and managing cramps and managing soft tissue injuries will be extremely paramount for the Wildcats as we go on in camp and as it continues to soar into the hundreds degrees. Luckily, later this week, next week, we're maybe seeing some temperatures back in the 90s. They'll have some night practices. They'll have a night practice at Arizona Stadium next Friday starting at about 7 o'clock. So that'll get the guys maybe a little cooler weather. So it's really important to your biggest thing in fall camp is managing the health of guys, managing hydration, and not letting hydration or cramps or anything like that turn into soft tissue injuries, because that's one thing that can really sink a team in fall camp, and we see it all around the country every single year with that. The wide receiver rotation. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this with this team right now because Tetairoa McMillan is out. And so we're looking to see who steps up, who's on the level of, being a factor in the wide receiver room. And I saw a couple guys today that, showed up and showed out. Montana Lamonius Craig is acting as the number 1 receiver right now. That's how you have to look at it, because he is one of the returning starters for the Wildcats. The three starters at wide receiver last year for the majority of the year were Jacob Cowing, Tetairoa McMillan, and Montana Lamonius Craig. MLC looks really darn good out there. And I know he's got to put it on the field. I know he's got to see the ball in the bright lights and be that versatile weapon that Arizona thought they were getting when he transferred in. But I think that he is really settling in to his role and what he does as a versatile threat in this offense. Saw him catching screen passes, saw him blocking well, saw him catching corner fades in the end zone, saw him catching balls on fly routes. He can do a lot in and of this offense. And I think that he showed a lot today and continues to show a lot with T-Mac being out with that foot injury or being limited with that foot injury. Another guy I saw today that really impressed me physically and speed-wise, Raymelo Murphy, the transfer from Old Dominion. He's showing out extremely well, has a quick burst off the line of scrimmage, cuts well, runs good routes, seems to be learning and absorbing a really good understanding of the offense. Not quite as many moments as Montana Lamonius Craig today, but Murphy could definitely be a factor in this offense, and I think that's what they brought him in to be. Malachi Riley had a little bit more of a quiet day. We heard Noah Fafita talk about him a little bit at Big 12 Media Days and what he can bring to this offense and how excited they are about him. We'll wait to see when full pads come on in practice 5, how he starts to adjust to, the speed of things and everything like that, and sort of become that breakout player for Arizona's offense. But there are options at wide receiver, and there are options again at tight end as well. Kean Burnett had a fairly good day on the offensive side of the ball. Roberto Miranda was stellar, really all the way throughout. He was seen before this as a blocking tight end, has one career catch at Arizona. He could be really, really an important part of this offense moving forward, especially in those heavy sets. Like we mentioned, he's someone that can leak out, but also can stretch the field a little bit as a tight end as well. There's a joke in the press box, a joke with the media that they call him Das Gronk because he's German descent. So Roberto Miranda could be somebody that plays a major factor in this offense from a production standpoint and not just a blocking standpoint. Last thing I want to discuss with the offense before we get to the bear down rundown is, of course, the offensive line, because we talked to a couple veteran O-linemen in post-practice press conferences today, as well as offensive coordinator Dino Babers discussing plenty about the frontline group. Now, we basically know who 3 or 4 of the starters are on the Arizona offensive line, but with Raymond Pulido being out for the season, the projected starting left tackle, we didn't know who would fill that spot. We may have a new leader in the clubhouse. Rhino Tap'atoutai is a redshirt freshman from Utah, and he may have the inside track to starting at that position. Rhino took most of the ones reps today at that left tackle spot, seemed to perform well, seemed to be a strong left tackle blocker, run blocker, and really setting the tone out there at perhaps the most important position on the Arizona offensive line. Both Jonah Sabanaya and Josh Baker had incredible things to say about Rhino and what he brings to this group, how he's growing, how he's learned from guys like Jordan Morgan and the other veterans in the offensive line group, how having a guy like Wendell Moe next to him, who was an all-conference caliber performer last year, can really boost Rhino at left tackle. We heard from those guys about their teammate, and we also heard from Dino Babers on what he expects from Rhino and maybe a little bit how he is feeling and how he is adjusting to the speed of the college game after redshirting in his first season on campus last year out of high school in Utah. Rhino's going to be a factor this year. Just take a listen to what the guys had to say after practice.
Quick feet. Rhino's got good feet, good hands that get off the ball.
His energy and attitude as
Yeah.
well. I love his attitude and his just toughness. Like no matter what, he could be dying, but he's there with us.
Yeah.
I love that about him. When he's out there and it's hot as heck, he looks like he's over there about to throw up, and he's back in it. He's back in it. It doesn't matter how hot he's feeling, how down he is. He's with us and he's there. He's fighting. Love that kid.
Rhino's been out there working. He's been doing a good job for us. And I think as he continues to grow out there, the more reps he gets, he's going to get better and better and better.
So Rhino Tap'atoutai, your leader in the clubhouse to start at left tackle for the Arizona Wildcats, and that would be the only redshirt freshman really in the mix to start at one of the starting spots for Arizona this fall. But we could see somebody emerge at right guard. Leif Magnuson looks to be the incumbent there, looks to be the starter there, but one of these other talented guys could come in and push for some starting minutes. And of course, injuries always do play a factor in fall camp. Knock on wood, fingers crossed that nothing happens to this Arizona offensive line room, because the starting group and what they have coming back is one of the foundations of this team and one of the foundations of this quote unquote nasty offense. But, they do need to build the depth. And Baker talked a little bit about how getting the young guys some of these reps early on in camp can help as you move along throughout the season, because it's a war of attrition, especially in this new Big 12, especially in a Big 12 where a lot of teams want to come in and hit you in the mouth, especially defensively. Arizona's got to stay healthy on that offensive line. And if it wants to stay healthy and continue winning games, it has to win the war of attrition, and it has to have depth on the offensive line. All right. That's it for my practice report for today. Now it's time for the Bear Down Rundown. And today, August 2nd, 2024, it's a historic day in U of A history because the Wildcats are now officially members of the Big 12 Conference. All conferences welcoming in their new members in this year's realignment today, which means Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah are officially members of the Big 12. The conference put out a bunch of cool things, cool videos on social media welcoming in the new members of the conference. And I think it really does help the blueprint of the aggressive Big 12. I talked a little bit about this in my very first podcast for Bleav in Arizona a couple weeks ago and why Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 than the Pac-12. But I think the Big 12 needs Arizona just as much as the latter because the Big 12 knows that it wants to be a coast-to-coast league. Well, there you go. You have Arizona and ASU in the Mountain Standard time zone and Pacific for most of the year, really. And then you have teams like UCF in the Eastern time zone and West Virginia as well. So you're kind of all the way through when it comes to when it comes to Big 12 football. You're seeing them in every window, every TV window. They're going to be aggressive in those windows and figure out how to give this conference a spotlight. And it seems to be a great candidate for expansion as well. If things go to the wayside with the ACC and Florida State and Clemson suing for grant of rights, we could see those two teams or other teams from the ACC added to the Big 12 with this new aggressive mindset from Commissioner Brett Yormark. So it's an exciting time to be part of a growing conference, and it's really exciting to get into something on the upswing. And Arizona is certainly part of the upswing, and it's getting into the Big 12 on the upswing. And it's just so many good feelings today before the rivalries take shape on the field and the court, and before, the heated battles and, maybe conversations about the Big 12 refs or everything like that. It's all smiles today. It's all hugs. It's all welcome home to this conference. Arizona is officially a member of the Big 12. An historic day, a truly historic day for the Wildcats and the University of Arizona, and will set the foundation for years to come with this athletic program. Certainly excited for basketball season, but football season remains first and foremost remaining on the brain. As you know, with the Arizona football schedule, the Wildcats will play at Kansas State in a non-conference game, which will be its unofficial introduction to the Big 12. And then it'll have to wait a couple more weeks for a Big 12 game. And it's another familiar foe in Utah, one of the Four Corners schools coming in, that the Wildcats will play at Utah on September 28th. So you don't really see anything new from a Big 12 conference standpoint, a true Big 12 conference standpoint, until Texas Tech comes in here on October 5th to play in Tucson in the home Big 12 opener, the first ever home Big 12 game for the Arizona Wildcats football team. That'll certainly be exciting. We're looking forward to basketball whenever that schedule comes out. Real quick note before we wrap up here about basketball, since I'm thinking about it. Arizona will play Duke on Friday, November 22nd at McHale. That's a 7 p.m. tip at McHale Center in Tucson. So it should be really exciting to see one of the top-ranked teams in the country coming in here. And hopefully the Wildcats will be able to replicate the result from last year when they won at Cameron Indoor in that huge non-conference win over Duke early on in last season. That'll do it for this edition of the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Matt Reynoldson. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel as well over at Matt_Reynoldson. We'll be back on Sunday for yet another practice report from Arizona football fall camp. Until then, have a great weekend.